Thank you, Cuauhtémoc. That was a great survey of the Shanghai Biennale for those of us who haven't seen it. And yeah, a great beginning for our conversation. So our panel is titled One Belt, One Road, Hong Kong as a Window to the World. I just want to say first that there's like an interesting metaphor in the second part, which is the idea of a window. So, you know, coming both ways, but also something that's maybe impenetrable. So we'll maybe try to come back to this idea of different metaphors for what Hong Kong as a city is, and especially its relationship to China. So I also want to say that we're not from the propaganda department, at least as far as I know. So One Belt, One Road is an official initiative of the Chinese government, a huge $1 trillion infrastructure and trade vision, which, as that map that Cuauhtémoc showed, is essentially trying to make China the center of a new trade route, which they have alternately called the New Silk Road or the Maritime Silk Road. I think in Chinese, actually, the One Belt, One Road is officially called the New Silk Road and Maritime Silk Road Project. So it's rooted in a kind of history and a sense of China's ambitions. And we are in Hong Kong. So again, we're maybe like a lemura riding along a gigantic shark or a whale. So that could be another metaphor. So we'll get into it. So first, I'm going to introduce our three speakers. You've already heard from Cuauhtémoc, but first we'll hear from Yola Lenzi, who's curator, critic, historian of Southeast Asian modern and contemporary art. So she will talk a little bit about her projects. Then we'll hear from Lorraine Milan, who is the director of Edouard Milan Gallery. And finally, we'll hear a little bit about the curatorial projects of Harald Kraemer, who's an associate professor of creative media here at the City University of Hong Kong. So we'll start with Yola, and then subsequently we'll have a conversation all together.
Thanks. Is that on? Yes, it is. Thanks so much, HG, and thank you to the association for inviting me today. I have about 6 or 7 minutes to effectively not really present my projects. I think I'd rather present the project of the non-center of Southeast Asian art. We had your introduction talking about centers and marginalization. Southeast Asia had a mainstream art world.
That's the pointer.
Oh,
This is the forward.
that's the forward.
This is the forward. This side.
There we go. Okay, so this is what art looked like, very Euro-American in the 70s, just after the new nation states of Southeast Asia were created. So I can't do a full course on modernism in Southeast Asia in 7 minutes, but what happens next is this. And there's a big disconnect, effectively, a social disconnect between what was promised by new nationalisms in Southeast Asia, post-colonial nationalisms, and what actually transpired. In other words, the promises were broken by the new national governments. There was no citizen empowerment. So what happens is there's an art world split. And I then, I deal with the other side, the non-center art, the non-consensus art. And it's sort of interesting, I think, to tie into Hong Kong, which is why I'm presenting it this way, because it's all about center and margins and how those two, there is a tension between the two, but they actually do intersect. So this is a little bit of what then happened in the 70s in Southeast Asia in terms of artworks. And there were many artworks made that were street works because there were no institutions, unlike Hong Kong now, which has lots of good institutions and galleries. In the Southeast Asia in the 70s, there was nothing. So artists typically were responding directly to the social situation and were taking huge risks with their art-making practices that were, literal and conceptual. And we move forward, and the strand continues. It's interesting that the non-center, the margins, continue to make work until today. And this is interesting because the consensus center art world continues as well. So it's this idea that you can have two different strands operating in one space, in one physical space, but also in one intellectual and one national space, despite control. So this is again where you arrive in the Chinese situation, the mainland one, possibly now the Hong Kong situation as well, is that you can have coexistence, and it's healthy. It's actually a healthy thing. And here's a little bit of what art looked like when people were making it for the street, for real people. So not elite audiences in art galleries and not paying audiences, but people interested in civil society. And then bringing Hong Kong in. How does Hong Kong tie into all this? Well, it does in a way, because Hong Kong traditionally has a history of not being in the center of China. It is China, but it isn't China. And so isn't it then an appropriate space for thinking about margins? And for me, as someone dealing with Southeast Asian margins, isn't there then a connection, a transnational connection between Hong Kong and Southeast Asian, I wouldn't like to call it political art, but contestative or questioning art. And in fact, you do find that in the 90s, someone like Oscar Ho was putting together exhibitions such as the one up on the screen, being Minorities, which is already considering the idea of the non-center, of the margins, and the play of that in Hong Kong historically. So is that continuing today? I don't know. Perhaps our panel can answer that. Or are we moving away from that? Is One Road, One Belt in effect the opposite of that? Or can it actually, is one belt, one road, or one road, one belt, a two-way belt, a two-way street? And can effectively Greater China absorb the margins? And if so, what happens then to the center? I mean, does something happen, or does that not happen? A couple more works just to show that this this idea of contestative art that is disputing a place within the center, as it were, that increasingly now is advocating for itself as a new center, as another center within Southeast Asia, continues, and gets actually quite a bit of play outside Southeast Asia, and would potentially also find a good audience in Hong Kong. And a work which I'll finish on this work, I think my time may be up at this point, to show how an artist, over 10 years ago, a Southeast Asian artist from Malaysia. Malaysia has very stringent pro-Malay, ethnic Malay laws that discriminate against Chinese. Chinese are an ethnic minority in Malaysia. And this is an artist who was invited to produce a new work for a Chinese audience and inverted that trope, as it were. Instead of being the minority Chinese in Malaysia, he became the majority Chinese in China, and then is advocating for the marginal Muslims of China. And that, of course, this work is quite prescient. 2005, if you forward to today, I think you'll all understand what the relevance of that work was then, and how it becomes more relevant now to talk about a marginal population within China. So how does One Belt, One Road play into that or play against that? I think that the panel hopefully will elucidate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yola. Lorraine, you want to give us a quick...
Hello, everyone. I'm Lorraine Milan. I'm the director of Edouard Malingue Gallery. So thank you again for the Hong Kong Gallery Association for inviting me to be on this panel. So to give you some introduction about the gallery, we opened in 2010. That's when I met Edouard, and he moved from London to Hong Kong. And the idea to open a gallery in Hong Kong was because we realized there was a lack of art galleries who were here to promote local artists. And so over the course of the last 8 years, we have been developing a program that both supports local Asian as well as international artists. For us, it was important to have this dialogue between Asian and international artists, and also to promote the artists from this region abroad. So we opened in 2010, and then in 2016, we decided to open a space in Shanghai. The reason behind this, I guess, also links back to the to the subject of our talk, is that after 6 years in Hong Kong, we thought that we still didn't have a very strong dialogue with the audience in mainland China, and especially with the collectors there. And so we decided 2 years ago to open a space in Shanghai at the West Bund area, a new area that supports the cultural center of Shanghai. And since then, we have been holding shows both in Hong Kong and Shanghai. So we run around 12 to 14 shows a year. We do 6 to 8 art fairs a year. And outside of the gallery, we also promote our artists in doing projects and collaborations with institutions. So we do have 2 artists, Samson Yang and Yuan Yuan, who are in the Shanghai Biennale this year. So we're very happy as well. So I would like to show you, to give you some idea of what the gallery does. First, I wanted to introduce several shows that we've done in the last couple years to give you an idea of the scope of the work we do. Myself, I'm a very strong advocate for video art. And so in the program, we represent 24 artists. And within that program, we have many artists who work in the medium of video. And so I decided that every year in Hong Kong, we would, in the summer, do a film screening that kind of promotes artists from the region. And so this was the last film screening we did this past summer, which showed including Hong Kong artist Ko Sin-tong, Wang Peng, and also Taiwanese artist Yu Zhengda and Su Youxian, a Chinese artist Tao Hui, and also Evelyn Wang, who's a Chinese artist who's based in Amsterdam. This is Philip Lai. We had his first exhibition earlier this March. He's a Malaysian who's based in London and has been shortlisted for the Hepworth Prize this year. Quan Sheng-chi, he's a very important Hong Kong artist. He won the first Hugo Boss Asia Prize. And we had his first show in 2017. It was a very interesting show, which required people to crawl at the entrance before entering to see the exhibition. This is Su Mei Zi. She's half Chinese, half British, who's based in Luxembourg. She won the Venice Biennale Gold Lion Prize in 2009. And we will be showing her also again in Shanghai, where she will be having her museum retrospective at the Youth Museum and afterwards at the Taipei Fine Art Museum. This is João Vasco Paiva. He was Hong Kong based. Now he's moved back to Lisbon, but a Portuguese artist who has lived in Hong Kong for more than 10 years. This is Ko Sin-tong, a female artist in Hong Kong, very young conceptual artist. And then moving on, these are the shows we've done so far in the last 2 years, briefly to give you an idea of what we do in Shanghai. The current show right now in Shanghai is Samson Yang, who represented Hong Kong last year at the Venice Biennale. And he developed a new series of works looking at how people are being in some way controlled in society through the subject of vehicles and motor vehicles, how we drive and the laws that are required behind this whole system. And since last July, I helped organize this event in Shanghai called Condo, which is based on the idea of collaboration. I find that very meaningful between galleries, that we can collaborate with one another. And so this event was curated first in London, following in New York, and then now in Shanghai. So I invited 10 local galleries to host 10 to 15 visiting galleries internationally and to have a collaboration. So each gallery then had their own project presenting different artists, both locally and internationally. And it was a very good success. And the press was also very interested in this kind of collaboration, because we are often saturated by this constant art fairs and events outside of the gallery, and it was very nice to bring attention back to the gallery space and to invite people to physically visit different galleries. This was a group show, so we also do a lot of curated shows with visiting curators. So this was a show with actually all 3 artists were not represented by the gallery, but it was nice for us to do also from time to time curated exhibitions based on interesting themes that we thought would stimulate the population in Shanghai. This is Wang Wei and Ko Sin Tong, so we also kind of do group shows between our artists. Eric Baudard is a French artist who we also represent. And then just to give you a few images of projects we've done outside of the gallery. This is Wang Wei. He's an artist based in Beijing that we presented at West Bund last year. It was an outdoor floor tile installation. So you see the shadow of the tree, which is actually all made of mosaic tiles. So it's a play on the interaction between the public and private space and what you see as reality and alter reality. And he won the Art Review Prize last year for this project. And so you can still see this installation now at West Bund. We presented Cho Yu Cheng this past year at Art Basel Hong Kong, which is also an interactive piece where people are invited to look at a performer who is a cleaner cleaning extremely large sculptures of dishes. This is Samson Yang, who was at the Venice Biennale last year. Sun Xun had his first museum show in Sydney at the Museum of Contemporary Art this year. We also work outside with institutions, nonprofits, like the MCAD in Manila, where we presented an Indonesian group, Tromorama, and Taiwanese artist Cho Yu Cheng. And then we're very happy also that this year we had 2 artists from Hong Kong, Wang Ping and Samson Yang, who were included in a 4-artist show at the Guggenheim. And so in this picture, you'll see a work by Wang Ping. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Harald, you want to...
Well, now it's up to me. My name is Harald Kraemer. I'm associate professor at School of Creative Media. I've bought my first work of art with 12. At the same time, I cutted out the illustrations of my school book and put them on the wall, things like that. So I'm a curator and collector by passion, because the work of art has been 120 German marks and I had only 20. I have washed the car of the artist for the rest of the year. So I made a very bad deal. That was my first lesson I've learned. And since then, I had a lot of practice and experience in making exhibitions and making books. I've made my PhD about museum informatics and digital collections. So I'm also in the museum documentation field. And since 2014, I came to Hong Kong to start the master program Curating Art and Media. I started with 20 students, now I have 70. Some of them are here and make you feel like comfortable, so they are the helpers behind the walls. And I would like to talk today about 4 specific projects. The first one is IZEA Hong Kong, the International Symposium on Electronic Arts, which I had the pleasure to co-curate with Kyle Chung. He's in the audience. And that was, for the School of Creative Media, a big effort, because we are a university, we are not an exhibition hall. So we take over the whole building on all 9 floors. We have shown the works, and on 3 other locations, at PolyU School of Design, at HKU, and Connecting Spaces. So all in all, we had 140 artists, and it was a big effort. We also produced a nice catalog, and well, one of the most provocative works had been the work of Don Ritter, Burning 2, who burned down the School of Creative Media virtually. For me, it was really interesting, because I'm not really a media art historian or related to media art. I'm very exotic at the School of Creative Media. I'm an art historian at a School of Media Artists at a University of Engineers. So it's not a very easy situation. But I learned a lot about the conditions, how to bring all these out, how to make that happen, and that there is a strong effort to create all these things. A lot of things can happen in Hong Kong, and that makes Hong Kong to a very special place. I will talk later a little bit about that. The second project I have realized is the Age of Experience. The Age of Experience are 2 exhibition shows. The first one has happened at the Run Run Shaw Creative Media Center, so the School of Creative Media, and the second one in Vienna at the University of Applied Arts Innovation Lab. 2 exhibitions, all in all, around 50 works of 33 faculty members, alumni and students of School of Creative Media. Here's a list of names. I don't want to mention all of them, but I just can mention Samson Young, because he has been mentioned by a lot of people today. And I had the pleasure to work with him. So I have shown the Muted Situations 2015. These, on the left side, you see the exhibition in Hong Kong, on the right side in Vienna. And the exhibition to show in Vienna was a little bit like a lucky draw, because the director of the University of Vienna, of the University of Applied Arts in Vienna, he came to a symposium about public art, and we had, on the same day, we had the opening of the show, and he said, wow, this is great, I want to show this in Vienna. So we pimped it up a little bit, because at the beginning we had only 12 works of art, very reduced, very stylish, a lot of dark corners, things like that. And in Vienna, we have shown, well, all faculty members. And it was really a big effort to show that. The reactions have been, Roland Schöni, he is one of the most renowned art critics in Vienna, in Austria. And he has written, The Age of Experience is one of those rare projects that immediately convey the feeling of having arrived in the 21st century. Current media art, whose experimental approach in many places touches the frontmost areas of algorithmically based work, that fascinates simply. Overall, however, this project is an aesthetic flagship of Hong Kong, the mega city of the technological avant-garde. And I like the last sentence. I like that really much. The technological avant-garde and the mega city. So I'm sorry, it's too blue. You can read it. I can't read it from here. But I think at that moment I learned, by creating the show and bring that to Vienna, that these guys in Europe can learn a lot from us, and that makes me really proud. Yeah. So because my initials are HK, like Hong Kong, and when I was a kid, I found out there is a town who has the same initials like my name, so that must be a really good place. Yeah? And I always wanted to come. The third project is Interval in Space, which is a cooperation, an artistic exchange program between Switzerland and Hong Kong. And I have organized this. I have the idea together with my partner, Janine Stoll. She is based in Basel. So we have started a few of the projects. We have invited Adrian Falkner, Smash 137, the famous street artist who came to Hong Kong. Then we invited Samuel Adam Swope, a Hong Kong-based artist, to show his work during Art Basel. And then the third one was Interval in Space, organized by Fondation Naïrs in Switzerland, Asajj Art Foundation, and Consulate General of Switzerland in Hong Kong. Yeah, it has been curated by Janine Stoll, me, and Charles Merriweather. And the next exhibition will be in planning the return of the poet, A New Landscape. So as you can see the names, so 4 from Switzerland, 1 from Austria, and we have Nadim Abbas, Ahoy Lam, Sarah Lai, Lee Kitt, and Kingsley Ng, who is also in the audience here. Good. Here are some impressions of the works. And on the left side, you see the work of Kingsley in combination with drawings of Matthias Lichty, and in the front, this stick from Judith Fegel. You see that Fondation Naïrs, it's an old hotel founded in the late 19th century, and now there is a great artist in residence program, and and you see there is the cooking session in the kitchen. So Nadim Abbas made the best drunken chicken I've ever had. So we had this Hong Kong Krishuna weekend, and it was very special. This is Asajj Gallery, the show in the Asajj Gallery. And here you see we had a lot of visitors, very young kids, but also specialists. And the last project is archiving ephemeral knowledge, Hong Kong martial arts as a strategy for documentation. And this is also a very specific project because here I have invited specialists, archivists from performing arts, performance art, and martial arts to come to Hong Kong and talk about their way of archiving and documentation, because we thought it's very close. So at the end, I have chosen this sign of a circle because we said one belt, one road. So for me, it's a circle, but on the other side, it's also a wheel. You see the center is empty, and it's up to us to fill it with value and meaningful content. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harald. Hang on to the microphone, Harald, because I'm going to ask you a question. Harald, since you ended with that lovely metaphor of the wheel and the circle, which the empty center connects a little bit to what Yola was saying, so that was nice, thank you. But I wanted to ask you actually about the circulation of information and also awareness, and maybe even on a kind of linguistic level in the areas that you work. How would you kind of describe or characterize the flow of information, say, around the region in some of the exhibitions that you've done, and what is the level of like permeability and translucence even in terms of communicating about technology?
Personal.
Well, just in your experience with working with artists, and like, do you find like that through media and technology there is a common language? Is that a portal? Is that a way of reaching
there
across?
is not really a common language. So behind the idea of interval in space was the idea to find out how are artists in Hong Kong dealing with space. And then we have invited 4 artists from Switzerland and 1 from Austria, and we found out they have a completely different understanding of space. So it's more in the sense of architecture, it's more with volume, thinking like this. But in Hong Kong, it's more, space is more in the sense of a social sculpture. It's more an intervention, an installation. And then we found out, let's bring them together and let's make an exhibition. Let's see how are the energies flowing between them. And that's we found a great partner in Fondation Naïrs and with Asajj. And so the idea was to bring them, all the artists, for 4 weeks and stay together in Naïrs, in the Engadine, in the middle of the mountains. There's nothing around, so they can't run away, something like this. So they have to stay. And you have one kitchen, so there is a lot of of cooking, a lot of engagement. They made hiking tours together, yeah. And then we created the exhibition show. And this is something which is really, really special in a way.
Lorraine, maybe I would ask you also a similar question to maybe just talk a little bit about how it's been bringing artists from Hong Kong to Shanghai and sort of Shanghai to Hong Kong. Like, how would you characterize that? Or even from Beijing via Shanghai to Hong Kong, like how's that gone, and like how is that level of communication and translation? How does that?
We have shown Hong Kong artists in our Shanghai space, and I think it's there is a curiosity and openness for the Chinese public to look at what Hong Kong artists are doing. I think the aesthetic is very different compared to what mainland Chinese artists are doing, and which is why I do think there is a difference, but I think the difference is very positive. I think the way they think is very different, and the way they present a concept is also very different. I don't think I should kind of explain how they're different, but I do believe the dialogue is open, and I often feel that there is a lot of interest for the Chinese public in looking at how Hong Kong artists perceive things. For the other way around, when we show a Chinese artist in Hong Kong, we also get that feeling, that openness. And it may be a little bit different when we show a Taiwanese artist in mainland China. But I think it's about the exposure. So the more often we show such artists in different regions, the more familiar they are with these names and what they do. And it's about that familiarity, and that we're not so afraid anymore to be associated with such works and such artists, that at the end, it really doesn't matter where the artist comes from.
Harald, do you want to say something?
Just one thing. The Swiss artists asked first, can we have a map of the exhibition space? The Hong Kong artist said, let's have lunch together.
Yola, I guess I would similarly ask you to talk a little bit about how, for example, the show that you have up now at 10 Chancery Lane with Bui Kong Khan, like how people receive Southeast Asian art in Hong Kong, because of course Hong Kong does have a kind of political and historical connections to Southeast Asia, and there are plenty of very active and also historical communities from that region. So how have you found that?
Yeah, it's not the first Southeast Asian show that I've done here, and in fact, Katie does a lot of Southeast Asian, and I've done Thai art as well. It's very interesting. The translation thing is the key thing, and the idea of the back and forth and the exchange. Firstly, the Hong Kong public is very receptive, I think, to the work of Southeast Asia. They're curious, but I think there are definite connections. And I think the marginality is one aspect. And the fact that I'm dealing with Southeast Asians who are not of the center, I think they connect with, but also the themes. I mean, the actual themes that this show is dealing with, ostensibly it's the Cold War and it's the Vietnam War and North and South, but ultimately if you transcend the localism of the show, you get to the idea of civil strife within one bigger place, the idea that citizens don't agree about certain points. And so I think, again, there's a connection beyond the specificities of the show, but also aesthetically. In this particular case, it's a Vietnamese artist critiquing effectively the idea of Chinese culture in Vietnam, which is, of course, very topical and connects directly with the theme of today, in effect. And he himself is part Chinese, so he's a Vietnamese he's a Sino-Vietnamese, as it were. So those dichotomies, I think, play out in his own persona. I think they play out in the work. And I think the Hong Kong audience is very receptive to that. But then on the other side of things, the artist comes here and he's also very interested in Hong Kong. So again, it's that two-way street, what you're describing about the Chinese curiosity and vice versa. I think it's only the non-knowledge and the tension between the absence of the curiosity and the absence of knowledge, I think, can only be fruitful. So I can only say positive things about bringing art to Hong Kong.
Cuauhtémoc, can I ask you also, maybe, since you earlier introduced the map of One Belt, One Road, which, you know, those arrows were unidirectional. And since you've done this big project in Shanghai, you know, how are you metaphorically thinking about this dynamic of, you know, is One Belt, One Road a two-way street in your experience, like going across two-way street, two, like, multi-directional shipping lanes in your Pacific example? How would you metaphorically characterize the cultural exchange of Shanghai?
I wouldn't like to put it metaphorically. I guess let's go to, you know, that synecdoche means, at least in Western rhetorics, that you signify the whole by a part rather than by something else. And I find it very interesting that there were two artists of totally different origin. One a Mexican in Berlin, Ilya Noe, and a Shanghainese, both Chang, that made very close works at one point in a general pursuit of certain questions about the relationship as performers and artists with their environment. Both has a very beautiful video, amongst others, where she's slowly walking, almost not walking, in the rush hour in the Shanghai subway, to the point that she becomes an obstacle. But it's like the constancy of her presence in the midst of a crowd, and also the fact that she never becomes a nuisance, but she becomes a referent that is phantasmatically almost present in a situation that is beyond control. And Ilya Noe, for many years, has managed to develop a certain type of walking that is, she's able to do works that look as she's walking, to the front and she's walking to the back. She's very effective at doing that in escalators. You know, PSA has a lot of escalators. And she performed that piece for a whole day. These are walks that take her 9 hours non-stop. And she was interacting with the people by being the person that was annoyingly going the other way on the same escalator. People were moving through the exhibition. Some people understood that she was part of something. Others thought that was simply a weirdo that was making, making troubles. Some people were rude, some people were not. I think that there's something very interesting about the role of contemporary art, of furthering some of interactions, and other times kind of freezing them, stopping them, and disturbing them by not really following the forces of history. And I think that it's extremely interesting to me that one of the because this was an exhibition that had to do with bringing a concept to the rest to see what they could do with it. And in this case, it was interesting to me that there was a possibility to actually understand that one solution to the question of progress is that it could be seen also as a position of examining resistance, that it is a position that is not really wishing to stop the train, but at least would like to be able to understand it a little bit more carefully than the speed of the train allows. So in that sense, certainly some of the geopolitical relationships that you're describing are implied, but they are sort of seen in a way that they're examined closely. Let me just bring another example that is from an artist that worked in a city venue. Jota Izquierdo is a Spanish artist that has been working First, with the concept of yellow capitalism, about how Chinese commodities were transforming the world and creating different networks of different informal and formal selling, and also how they were transforming the notion of culture. And now he made a fake thematic store in a mall that is basically displaying very fine fake trainers, along with several videos that are related to the way in which particularly the Louvre and Mona Lisa are beginning to circulate on the basis of celebrities taking on them. And one of them is Jeff Koons doing a ghastly collection for Louis Vuitton that is really, really one of the most horrible things that have ever been in the market. And with a Mona Lisa on it is really, really, I mean, Jeff Koons coming down 3 steps below Jeff Koons. But the other one is I'm going to reveal I know nothing about popular culture. This important singer that went to the Louvre with another guy. You know who I'm talking about. I don't. So the whole point is somehow to notice that the transformations are deep, and these maps are just talking to us about the big flows. But what is interesting is to actually look at how artists are investigating extremely fine questions. How does it feel is a fine question. What is not any longer as it looked. And in that sense, the question of what these artists bring have to do with a subtlety. I would put it this way: there's a social observation subtlety that is quite powerful.
Yeah, I'm hearing from all of you that, of course, the metaphor of our talk is this very grand governmental, economic, trade-oriented vision, and of course, in the reality of life and human communication and art is that there's actual exchange, that it flows both ways, and that's essentially irrepressible, and that, or inevitable, some combination of those willful and, fateful. So maybe, Harald, I would just ask you maybe, because Hong Kong is obviously not the center of this initiative as an idea. It's one of the maybe exit points or outflows. So it's, sorry to go back to metaphors, metaphorically caught in one of these streams, and we're saying that the stream is going both ways often. But maybe, Harald, we could just talk a little bit about what Hong Kong, what we can be optimistic about in terms of being in this liminal position between in and out, or at the portal between a kind of exchange.
Well, I've got the job to create this Curating Art and Media project because I have a long experience in different kinds of exhibition making and museums, and because 400 museums have been built in mainland in the last 3 years. So there is a growing market, and I created the program a very practical one. So we have not this, what normally, curators are, first of all, these guys who are talking, and then they're doing. And I think it's better to bring it down on earth and have people who can work, who know a lot, and become into the market, that they can work in museums. So some of my alumni are working now for Christie's, for Nanjing Museum of Art, things like that. So I can feel there is a need to do something, and it's my students are very hungry, and I think for me it's the best place at the moment to be here and to support all these young people that we can do something together.
Lorraine, maybe I would also ask you what your metaphor or synecdoche of choice would be like for Hong Kong's role, in relationship to China. You know, how would you characterize that?
Well, for now, at this moment, I think Hong Kong has a very important role in China because thanks to its tax system, the art fair does extremely well, and it manages to invite international curators, collectors all over the world to come to Hong Kong. And so it's a chance really for the Chinese artists, the local artists to present and also have a strong program and show it to the international world. So I find Hong Kong an extremely important portal for that. But nonetheless, I think over the years, Shanghai could also be as equally important as an art hub in Asia, thanks to the opening of many museums and galleries, art fairs, biennials. All these kind of infrastructure really help develop Shanghai slowly as the years to come to become also as important as Hong Kong. So I think I'm happy that there is another alternative aside from Hong Kong in Asia that can also help support the art ecosystem.
Yola, you were saying that Hong Kong is a kind of special place for contestative art. Are there other places, or and how does it?
You know, I think China. If you think about China and the Silk Road and the inherent cosmopolitanism and hybridity of China, which is sort of repudiated in a little currently because of economics, I guess, largely, and national sentiment. I think Hong Kong for sure is a special place on that level, but I don't see why Hong Kong couldn't be claimed by mainland for its hybridity and for its contestativeness in a cultural sense. I mean, clearly, politically, it's not viable, but I think culture and politics intersect and yield something very interesting. And I think if you take it on board and claim it and own it, it's actually, and tame it, it's actually something that you're better off doing than not. So and the Chinese typically are quite smart on that level. So I think I hope certainly as a Southeast Asian that will be the case, and that the artists of Southeast Asia will still be able to come to Hong Kong and China to show the kinds of works that they're still making, and that, you know, contestation can be taken out of its context. There's a lot to be said for that. Yeah.
Comparing to Europe, we are at the point where we have not too much of the same. And I think that makes it special, because I'm so bored visiting exhibitions in Europe, and I see it doesn't matter if it's Spain, Italy, or Germany, or France. I see always the same artists, the same works of art in different variations. And this is not what is going on to happen in Hong Kong.
Cuauhtémoc, do you have this response to this idea of contestative art in this context, or maybe in the context that you know it better?
I haven't been long enough to be able to characterize what's happening here. And I think that if I could be long enough, I'd be very critical of those characterizations. So, however, I have a feeling that it was very interesting, first of all, how easy it was to actually get suggestions for the biennial I did of artists that were in Hong Kong. I was really, really shocked with the interesting material that was being suggested. At the end, there's a part of a piece by Li Kechung had to do with the Victoria Monument that couldn't happen. That has to do with the difficulty that the history of Hong Kong poses to the central narrative, that seems to suggest the importance of making artworks about the history of Hong Kong, because there's a certain potential about the impossibility of absorbing that complex, precisely cosmopolitan history into official narratives developing around. I would say that the three artists I was discussing have an element in common that was quite extraordinary. That their methodologies are less about presenting than about a certain camouflage. There's a certain cultural luxury in relation to art circuits that allows very ephemeral or evanescent practices to have an important place. And I would seem to believe that if I were a curator or a gallerist or a collector here, I would be very, very committed to try to preserve the space for that. Nadim Abbas did something incredible. He really wanted to disappear in the biennial. I mean, that's something that is very, very, very different what I was facing with other colleagues that were wanting to appear in the biennial. So that is something I really want to point out. I don't think could characterize anything, and I would be the least qualified and inclined to do it. But I felt very strongly, as it's obvious, very strongly fascinated by that part of the production. CNG, being an agency that is trying to do something entirely different from the commercial and also, I would say, scholarly system, we're doing things that I would precisely describe as an attempt to undo the system from inside. I also think that there's something very, very special about it. I mean, most artists in the route of the Shanghai Biennial, I saw, had ideas, went back home, discussed it with my colleagues, invited them back. I need to confess that two of the artists that I spoke today, I invite them on spot, breaking my system. Rules.
Hang on to that one. Actually, we have about 10 minutes left. And since we've talked for a few minutes, I just want to see if there are questions from the audience, because I think because we have a good group of people here today and also on stage. So this is your chance also to ask. I mean, we can happily keep talking, but I just want to. Fabio, would you like to ask a question?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
We've heard about Southeast Asia, we heard about China, but we haven't heard about this, we haven't heard about Turkey or places like that, where you have been living and traveling extensively just on that. Is there any insight that you can give us on how Hong Kong and China is perceiving these spaces, and whether Hong Kong can be a model of certain openness and freedom that might not exist everywhere else in Asia?
Sure. Fabio is just asking me to reflect on East Asia versus West Asia communication, lines of communication, because I was in Dubai last week. I just will tell a few anecdotes. One was I've had 2 encounters with people in the last year from Turkey and Dubai who are both involved with institutions there, who both said, oh yeah, we're looking at China and we're thinking about India and we're looking for artists from those regions. And I noted them because that was really a rare situation. I mean, Yola actually did a show. We met because she did a show at a space called Arter in Istanbul. And it was a group show of Southeast Asian artists. And my memory of that event was really that it was just so, in a way, out of context for so many viewers, because people just don't often have an impression of, other parts of the world. I mean, sorry, it was gay, but it was fun and interesting also because there were fewer preconceptions. I don't know, maybe actually you could reflect on that.
I should comment that. I to the opposite, I was impressed about the the Istanbulites audience's ability to latch on to the works and to find resonance in a lot of the works. But of course, the works were Yeah, they're along the lines of what I showed, except a lot of them more recent. But I guess that travels actually, and so going back to Hong Kong, I think the ethos of Hong Kong radiates out. So I wouldn't be surprised if people in the Middle East sort of latch on to Hong Kong as that kind of platform of radiation and absorption and radiation. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that also there's a way in which, a little bit like what Harald was saying, like there's interest in exploring new places, and different centers get interested in different alternative centers for at a different time. So I think I don't want to generalize, but there are ways in which certain funding streams or certain sources of novelty and interest evaporate, and that then people realize that they should be looking somewhere else. And I mean, sometimes it happens too late, or they're looking in the wrong places. I don't think people are always exactly on the nose in terms of their interest, but yeah, I think it's slowly happening in this kind of East Asia, West Asia cultural connection. But it may be, it's not as fluid, say, as it is in this part of Asia, in Hong Kong, between North, South, and East, West. Yes, we have a microphone coming, sorry, right behind you.
Hi, hello. I am Sylvie J. Giacchetti. I'm a consultant and also filmmaker here, based here in Hong Kong. I've been based here for 10 years. I'm originally from Italy, so it's very interesting because I've been noticing this focus, this Asia-China focus, and it's fantastic to be here at this time of history where for art, for development, it's all China-centric. It's all about East Asia. So now I am in touch with many talented students, aspiring artists coming from both Western Europe, so Italy, the UK, where I have an interest, and also the United States. They would like to come here, but is there really a space for such people to be nurtured and hosted and nurtured here? Because what I find is, especially for myself, I find that this local focus is creating actually a rupture with ethnicity. So it's all about who is ethnically coming from this region showcased. So is there a chance for such people coming from Europe and United States to be nurtured and showcased here in East Asia? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lorraine, do you want to comment?
Well, to give you more info about our gallery, another half of our program actually supports international artists. So we do actually work with João Vasco, who's Portuguese. We have a Turkish artist, actually, who's based in Istanbul. We have an American artist who's based in LA. We also work with several French artists, so to balance out the program. So the program actually is international. But indeed, I do agree with your comment that in some cases, there are exhibitions that are held in institutions where they are trying to focus on local artists, and whether or not an artist whose ethnicity is not Chinese, whether or not they would decide to include him or her in the exhibition can sometimes be difficult because they are looking really at somehow ethnically Chinese artist. But I don't think that's always the case. And I think that actually this should change over time. My time is up. Okay.
I think our time is up. Well, actually, Harald, I was just going to just quickly ask you to respond because you teach at a university, and Hong Kong, among other things, is also becoming a center for, arts education and discourse for the whole region. Do you have a thought about like the way in which people from abroad are able to navigate a local system in parallel?
We have at the School of Creative Media, we have this space on the 3rd floor, the Singing Waves Gallery. And if these young artists send us a strong proposal and convince us, they can have a show there. Yeah, but they have to bring the money. Yeah, yeah.
I think we all have to become
that's Hong Kong
locals
style. That's Hong Kong style.
Yeah. So in a way, we all have to become locals. You know, you have to learn to navigate the city, you know, for ourselves. So anyway, that's it for us. We're going to be around after the panel, so please come and chat with us. But thank you all, and thank you all to the panelists.